Thank you very much, Professor Popov. We have been discussing terrorism and terrorists. I wonder what they say when they talk to each other. Are they confident of their victory eventually? I would suggest they do believe in their victory, but we are certain that terrorists cannot win over at the end of the day. Although governments and states sometimes fail to defeat terrorists as well, both parties suffer heavy losses, but no one manages to completely destroy or eradicate the other one. But of course, the ones who suffer most are civilians, average people. Sometimes governments have to negotiate with some of the people they used to call terrorists or extremists just yesterday. Sometimes they have to sit down and talk. Sometimes they have to compromise. Sometimes they have to come to make deals with each other. How these issues are resolved in each specific country largely depends on the specific government of this country and how it goes about solving issues, about how it goes about resolving disputes, and how it reacts to challenges, and how it sets its priorities, which is very important. Turkey, for one, is a country which has suffered most from terrorist activities. At least for the past 20 years, Turkey has experienced this war on terror, especially as regards the Kurdish issue. Of course, there's been a big change compared to 30 or 40 years ago, when Kurds were not recognized as an ethnic group as such. They were written down as Turks and seen as Turks officially by the government. Of course, things have changed. Their rights and their identity have been recognized, but I suppose that's not been enough. Some 20 years ago, we were having a negotiation process with the Kurdish terrorists, which was successful or not, on and off at times. There was even a political party of the Kurds, which was legal, and it is now Turkey's third biggest political group, and it's present in the Turkish parliament. There was a hope for peace during that period, but unfortunately all that has been rolled back in recent years, and today the leaders of this Kurdish party, which was once trying to achieve, or at least announced that it was willing to achieve a peaceful settlement with Turkey, they have been arrested. Turkey has experienced serious issues in recent years, both domestically and as regards its foreign policies, particularly the Middle East and what's going on in the Middle East. The Turkish government has wanted to do something that's impossible, and that is revive the Ottoman Empire in one form or another. And since that, Ankara has presented certain territorial claims to its neighbors, particularly Syria and Iraq. And it's gone into some very dangerous and risky affairs, and the most dangerous of one was shooting down a Russian warplane in November 2014.
So Turkey is fighting terrorism in its own way, as the Turkish authorities begin, and they see the Kurds as the foremost terrorists, the Turkish Kurds and those from Syria. And the second objective is the Islamic State, which for Ankara is also terrorist sphere. And for a long time it was not recognized. You probably saw the reports that the proponents of the Islamic State used the territory of Turkey for their purposes. And not all Islamic terrorist organizations are viewed as enemies by the Turkish authorities. Some of them are being used, or there are attempts to use them in the purposes of the Turkish authorities. And the third objective for the Turkish authorities are the forces with which Turkey has cooperated for a decade. It was also an Islamist movement. Then they split, did not share decided to share the authorities, and Turkey is constantly fighting these terrorists, and it's complicated to fight so many fronts, and practically does not have friends in the world. That's the result of the foreign policy of Turkey, plus a great number of problems, the economic ones in the first place. The society is split almost 50-50, which was demonstrated recently by the referendum on the new constitution, which was conducted on April the 16th. That was transition to the presidential republic, when the president will control, supervise all the branches of power and all the provinces. One person will be in charge, and his influence will be limitless. In the conditions of an emergency and the number of problems, those who oppose the new constitution, the opponents of the president, they received 49%. Many people say that the results were rigged, and actually the results are quite opposite. But Stalin used to say that what is important is not those who come to vote, but those who count the votes. And as to falsifications, there were some European observers at this referendum, and then later on they expressed their doubts about the legitimacy of this referendum. But the Turkish authorities started calling them European terrorists at once. So in Turkey, it's easy to become a terrorist. So if you want to be branded as such, just go to Turkey, make a couple of statements, and you will be branded as a terrorist. That's a joke, of course, but jokes aside, there are tens of thousands of prisoners. Over 150 journalists are imprisoned, have been arrested, and here Turkey holds the first place in the world as to the number of arrested journalists. This is the way they fight terrorists in Turkey. And as a result, there are many victims and casualties in Turkey and in the world. The words of the founder of the Turkish Republic, Atatürk, are forgotten. His main principle: peace in the world and peace in Turkey. As to priorities, I have mentioned that in the foreign policy, these priorities are also important. We have been witnessing in the recent months how the Turkish authorities are volatile in deciding on their priorities, including Syria. Either they fight the Islamic State and other terrorists, or they want to overthrow the Syrian leader Assad. Recently, the Turkish leader made a statement in the name of Putin as well, saying that priorities are changing and Bashar al-Assad should be overthrown. That's again another confusion of priorities, which I have tried to describe. As to the foreign policy priorities, relations with Russia are very important for Turkey. I have mentioned the plane which was shot down. It was a great tragedy. After that, the process of reconciliation started. It is still underway, and on March the 10th, both presidents met, Putin and Erdogan, and they announced that the process of normalization is already behind them, and here I don't agree with either of them. normalization has not occurred. I think the relations have not yet returned to the state before November the 24th, before the shooting down of the plane. And there are various elements, various dimensions. The situation in Syria, embargo, sanctions, they all complicate the bilateral relations between the countries. And as you know, it was not just one plane, not one tragedy. At the end of the year, the Russian ambassador was assassinated. Ambassador Karlov was assassinated in Turkey, and we don't know the result of the investigation, though several months have passed, and we still don't know how many people were involved. So there are many alarming elements, reasons for concern. We'd like to be optimists and hope for the best, but we must start by understanding that time has changed. Now we're in a different period. You can't behave like you did at the time of the Ottoman Empire. Turkey is a medium-sized country, medium-influenced country, and this reality must be recognized by the Turkish leader. We don't need, Turkey does not need new territories. What it needs is building a democratic country, having the democratic order, becoming a democratic country with a democratic structure. And this is our wish. And with this, I would like to conclude my statement. Thank you.